Good evening, Steel City family. Welcome to SCM, MCS, Mysterious Crime Stories. Tonight we bring you the unsolved mystery of the Keddie cabin murders in Keddie, California. On the night of April 11, 1981, three people, a mother, her adolescent son, and a son's friend, were bludgeoned to death in the California cabin, all while children slept nearby in an adjacent room. A fourth victim, a 12-year-old daughter, vanished from the scene that night. Her remains were found years later and miles away. The slayings were called the Keddie cabin murders. They were very chilling. Yet what made the case more unsettling is that it remained unsolved and still remains unsolved more than 4 decades later. This led some people to believe that it was a police cover-up. Glenna Sharp, who went by the name of Sue, rented cabin 28 in the tiny community of Keddie, California. She rented it since November of 1980. She lived there with her 5 children. The family moved from Connecticut after Sue separated from her husband, James. Being newly alone and with 5 children to raise, Sue chose Keddie because it would be nearer to her brother Don, who lived nearby. Finding a new support system would be an important part as Sue restarted her life, even if it meant renting a cabin in a rundown resort in a rural area. 5 months later, the Sharps had found a semblance of community, with the younger children having made friends amongst the other residents of the Keddie resort community. On the night of the murders, Sue was at home while her 2 youngest sons, Rick and Greg, and their friend Justin Smart, played in an adjacent room. Tina, Sue's youngest daughter, returned home around 10 o'clock after an evening of watching television with the neighbors in cabin number 27. Sue's oldest son, John, had spent the day in a town of Quincy with his friend Dana Wingate. The pair was last seen walking along State Route 70. They returned home to cabin 28 later that night, presumably retiring to John's basement bedroom. Whether they entered the home and found the murders in progress, or they became aware of intruders after hearing a disturbance upstairs, is unknown. In either case, John and Dana did not survive the night. The following morning, Sue's oldest daughter, Sheila, came home after a night spent with friends, and upon entering the cabin, she discovered 3 bodies. All were sprawled on the living room floor of cabin 28. Sue, John, and Dana's bodies had been left on the floor After a search of the premises, it revealed the trio of the younger boys still in their rooms, unharmed. And with the help of neighbors, Sheila removed the 3 children. The final member of the Sharp family, 12-year-old daughter Tina, was nowhere to be found. The 3 victims had met a violent end. Their bodies were bound with medical tape and appliance wire. They had been stabbed, bludgeoned, and strangled to death. After examinations by the coroner, it was found that the victims had been bludgeoned with 2 different types of hammers. Sue and John had been stabbed repeatedly. Sue was also bludgeoned with a Daisy Powerline 880 rifle, while Dana Wingate was strangled to death by hand. Now, Sue was discovered lying on her side by the living room couch and was nude from the waist down. She had also been gagged with a blue bandana and her own panties. They were secured on her face with medical tape. Her wrists and ankles were bound so tight with medical tape and electrical wire that her legs and knees were drawn toward each other. She was covered with a blanket and a sheet that belonged to Tina. Johnny's hands were placed on his stomach and taped tightly at the wrists with medical tape. His ankles were wrapped twice and tightly knotted with an extension cord. Dana had also been bound with medical tape. Although the Sharps' cabin did not show any indication of forced entry, detectives were able to recover an unidentified fingerprint from the handrail that led to the cabin's back door. Detectives also discovered that the telephone had been left off the hook and the lights had been shut off with all the drapes fully closed. Various weapons were found at the scene, including a table knife, a butcher knife, and a bloody hammer. Other weapons, including the Daisy rifle, were never recovered. Some evidence, such as a bloody knife, turned up at a nearby trash bin behind the Keddie general store. In interviews with Justin Smart, detectives were told that Justin had dreamt the details of the murder, only later to confirm that he actually had witnessed it. Under hypnosis, Justin claimed that he had seen Sue with 2 men, one with a mustache and long hair, and one clean-shaven with short hair. John and Dana then entered the home and began arguing with the men. The argument became violent. The 3 were still alive when Tina entered the room. One of the men took her out the back door before coming back to kill Sue, John, and Dana. 3 years later, in April of 1984, and 29 miles away, a skull was found near Camp 18 in neighboring Butte County. The discovery prompted a thorough investigation and examination of the area, revealing a jawbone and several other bone fragments. The fragments were later determined to belong to young Tina. The discovery of Tina's remains compounded a case already steeped in mystery. Why was the body of Tina Sharp found so far away from Cabin 28? How could a murder with so much physical evidence remain unsolved? The abundance of loose threads, in conjunction with what appeared to be a substandard investigation, have prompted many to suspect a police cover-up. In 2004, Cabin 28 was demolished, along with several other condemned buildings on the grounds. Some theorists believe that mob, gang, or police connections were responsible for the botching of the case and the destruction of the property. But without complete facts, it's hard to know whether it was incompetence, conspiracy, or just mere bad luck. In 2008, Marilyn Smart, the mother of Justin, claimed in a documentary on the murders that she suspected her husband, Martin Smart, and his friend Bo Bubetti, were responsible for the murders of Sue, John, Dana, and Tina. In the same documentary, Sheriff Doug Thomas stated that Martin had successfully passed a polygraph. The use of polygraphs in criminal cases had become increasingly discounted in recent years. It was later confirmed that Martin was close with the sheriff of Plumas County, despite the fact that both Martin and Bo had criminal records. In November 2016, a true crime show called People Magazine Investigates released an episode dedicated to re-examining the Keddie cabin murders. Several new pieces of evidence and information came to light. They hoped it would eventually crack the cold case. First, the primary suspects in the slaying, Marty Smart and Bo Bubetti, were now deceased. New details continue to emerge that suggest their guilt. According to People magazine, Smart's anger towards Sue Sharp for interfering with his marriage was a viable motive for the killings. After the murders, he wrote a letter to his wife, Marilyn, which was only discovered after the case was reopened in 2013. The letter stated, "I've paid the price for your love, and now that I've brought it with 4 people's lives, you tell me, are we through?" Great. What else do you want? Though Marilyn claims she never received the letter and was only made aware of the letter after the murders, she confirmed that it was Smart's handwriting. Even more potentially incriminating is a therapist in Reno, Nevada, to whom Smart allegedly confessed to the murders. Another important piece of evidence is a hammer discovered by a man with a metal detector in a pond near the cabins. It matches the description of a hammer that Marty Smart claimed to have misplaced. It's currently being tested for DNA evidence. The bizarre piece to the puzzle is a copy of a 911 record found at the bottom of the Keddie murder case file box. The call dates back to 1984. In the weeks after the skull fragments had been found and confirmed to be Tina Sharp's, the anonymous caller identified the remains as Tina's, then hung up. The chilling records indicate that this caller knew the remains belonged to Tina long before the investigators had confirmed that. In April 2018, Plumas County Special Investigator Mike Gamberg stated that DNA evidence recovered from a piece of tape at the crime scene matched that of a known living suspect. Mike Gamberg, who leads the current investigation, is baffled by the inconsistencies. It's not what was done, he told the Sacramento newspaper in reference to the many flaws of the original investigation, but it's what was not done. Though the original inquiry into the Keddie murders was sadly lacking, there is new hope that authorities today may be able to discover the truth once and for all. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of SCM MCS, Mysterious Crime Stories. I will see you again next week.